With the Culture of Latin America DLC being released for Humankind and a diplomacy expansion coming well on the way, I think that it is high time we talk about what is next for Humankind's future. It is no secret that Humankind's player numbers took a huge nosedive after release due to several factors, namely bugs and glitches. With continued support, Amplitude has been able to iron out many of those kinks, but there really needs to be a big incentive to drive players back. While content packs are nice, people aren't going to be coming back in droves for 6 new cultures, even if they are big names like the Inca. That's where the new diplomacy expansion comes in. Unlike standard content packs, expansions, Humankind or otherwise, usually contain several new features, reworks, and additional content to change the way players play a game. I'm not expecting anything as dynamic as Gathering Storm and its natural disaster system, but this leaked diplomacy DLC has a lot of different areas that it could tackle. One of these areas is just expanding diplomacy in general. Things like vassal contracts, cold wars, espionage, and coalitions could all be fantastic ways to liven up the game and add a new dimension to building and strengthening your empire. Many of Humankind's systems are already in place, the problem is that they aren't fleshed out to the degree that they could be. For example, vassalage is a fairly constant reality of Humankind games, but there are few if any mechanics that encourage vassals to scheme against their overlord or hire other conspirators like independent tribes to bring them down from within. Crises are another example of an underutilized feature. They provide a very interesting look into how different countries inevitably have disputes between issues like politics, religion, and commerce, but don't seem to offer that many alternatives after a crisis has occurred. At the moment, you can either choose to press a crisis forward and threaten war for retribution, or retract those claims just in case you aren't ready for a full-scale conflict. Coalitions could be a great way to flesh out this mechanic in more ways than one. Currently, crises feel very one-sided. You either are strong enough to enforce your demands, or you aren't. Banding together with multiple factions that share a common cause to stop things like aggressive expansion makes sense. Just because someone has a larger army than any of the individual rivals shouldn't mean that those rivals wouldn't team up to bring the biggest threat down a peg, especially if they have valuable resources. Speaking of resources, independent people occupy a potentially interesting niche in this game because they are independent factions that are not player controlled. As of now, it seems that you can either leave independent people be and hire them as mercenaries or annex them peacefully or aggressively. There is no middle of the road here. I would love to instead be able to trade more actively with these tribes for strategic resources they occupy, even offering vassalization instead of outright annexation. If the terms are right, of course. It often feels like I am going at it alone sometimes in Humankind, even with alliances between nations. Perhaps with enough influence and respect, these people would go as far as to adopt their liege's city style and cultural affinity as a sign of mutual trust. There are so many different ways that you can slice an expansion-sized diplomacy update, and yet only so much space for content within the DLC. I could probably go on forever with how many impactful changes that this update could have, which is why I will be stopping here. I believe that Amplitude can pull through with this expansion, but it is also something that I will continue to be cautious about as I don't want to set my expectations too high and risk of being massively disappointed. Now, the only question I have left is, what do you want to see in this expansion? Feel free to go crazy in the comments section below, and also check out my other video where I talk about how we found out about this DLC in the first place by checking out the link in the top right hand corner of the video. Thanks again for watching. Peace.